Welcome back. Neil Blackmon of Saturday Down South. One of the most well put together college football websites that there is. Neil, thanks so much for being on the show, especially you guys cover the SEC in particular so well, and put a nice little fun spin on it all the way around. Thanks for hopping on the show. So schedules, TV schedules and all that starting to come out now. And if you look at the way things are with the new league, with the 16 teams, what are the things that kind of jump out at you about how this season's going to go?
Well, I mean, I just think with the expanded playoff, it's so interesting to see kind of whose schedule is manageable. Like you look at Tennessee and you see the over-under on them at 9 wins, right? And you say, what's it going to take to get into that group that's considered for the playoff? And when you look at Tennessee's schedule, quite honestly, it's pretty manageable. Like if you find a win against Alabama, which is a big if, there's not a ton of meat. It's not Florida's schedule, right? I mean, it's not what Alabama has to face. So I think, to me, it's kind of manageability of schedules that jumps out. And I think it's going to be that way for at least a little while because there's enough teams at the top that are capable of kind of making that playoff push. I mean, there's 10 teams that have win total projections in Vegas at 7.5 or higher.
Neil, one of those teams that's up near the top is Texas, and it's understandable they're rolling in with a lot of momentum right now, even though they are, coming off of a draft where they lost a ton of players. They can reload pretty quickly, given the era that we live in now with the portal and everything else. But Oklahoma, there just seems to be, I guess Sooner fans would classify it as a disrespect, but there's definitely this level of expectations that are not quite what they're used to. Do you see it that way as well, that you think Oklahoma's going to have a hard time adjusting in comparison to Texas, or how do you view both of those incoming here in year number one?
Man, I think Oklahoma is the ultimate kind of, I don't want to say, maybe they're kind of the X factor in that league. Like, would you be stunned if they go 7-5? I don't think I would. I think their fans might be, but I think I wouldn't be stunned by that. Then again, Brent Venables, and they went 10-3 last year. And while there's a lot of people talking about how they're replacing, basically the entirety of the offensive line, they did nice work in the transfer portal, and we've seen how quick that could go. Michael Tarquin has been a good starter in the SEC already at Florida. Spencer Brown's over from Michigan State. He can play. We know Branson Hickman can play. So, I mean, you look at that offensive line group and you say, I think that's a competitive group. And then Brent Venables is probably to get the defense right. And the biggest thing he's done culturally right is make it so there's competition defensively at Oklahoma. And he talked about that. He said, hey, year one, we knew who our starters were. And that's good. And it's also bad because it means that, there's 12, 13, 14 guys you trust, and that's it. He says he trusts 22 guys on their two deep on defense now. And he's one of the best minds in the sport. Like, it wouldn't stun me if they won 9 games. But I think it's just, can that offensive line hold up in that league? And we don't know. But in a world where there wasn't the transfer portal and they lost all these players, yeah, I mean, it'd be a rough entry. I'm not so sure it's going to be. And I think they're going to be one of the most interesting stories in the league for that reason.
We know why Gabriel left for Oregon, because Oklahoma felt like they had their quarterback for the future. If Gabriel was the quarterback, would our expectations for Oklahoma be the same or better?
I think they would be better because there'd be some continuity. And then I think probably they maybe get a little more credit for what they did in the transfer portal to protect Gabriel from an offensive line standpoint. So I think better. I also would have loved to see him with like Deion Burks, who I think is a guy who's going to really take a production leap that we see when players leave kind of middling programs and go to really good programs. And like Deion Burks is always open, right? He's going to catch 50 balls in the SEC. It's not, there's not some magic wand that's going to make him not open.
Neil, the Florida Gators have the most brutal schedule that I guess Satan has ever created, because that's terrible. I mean, it's just so bad. And Billy Napier is in a make or break year in many people's eyes. Maybe not his athletic director's eyes, but it almost doesn't seem fair, does it? To like, hey, you've got to be better this year. Oh wait, the SEC just threw these bricks at us.
Yeah, it's the most difficult college football schedule I've ever seen. And there has been a lot of, Twitter isn't real life, but there's all these fans trying to tell lies to themselves about how, it's not that bad to start if you just win the Miami game. First of all, I do think if they win the Miami game, certainly the narrative changes a little bit if they win that season opener. And I do think he will have support from Scott Strickland as long as DJ Lagway doesn't leave the program and transfer to Texas A&M. And as long as DJ Lagway is on the field in some capacity and shows recruits, hey, that's a guy I want to go play with. I think Lagway was the biggest recruit that Florida's landed in a decade. I think it now it becomes, can you keep him with NIL? Graham Mertz is going to start. Great guy to teach Lagway some things. And Florida, might be able to grind out bowl eligibility if they're better on defense. But with that schedule, I think the reality is Napier has to show the fan base that Lagway is the future. Scott Strickland will defend him. The big X factor at Florida has been Sass, who's the president of the university and was not the guy who hired Scott Strickland and was not there when Napier was hired. If Ben Sass sees a 5-7 product and wants to change, there will be a change.
Neil, we know that A&M burst onto the SEC scene with Johnny Football and the Heisman and all the craziness that came with that. Then there was obviously the big falling apart of the Sumlin era, and then the Jimbo chapter that's now come to a close. It seems to me that Mike Elko is not flashy, but that's not really what A&M needs at this point, and maybe it's good to kind of be in, I guess, some ways flying under the radar. Do you view it that way at Texas A&M right now, and just where do you sort of see them in the pecking order, especially knowing that they're about to be crowded here in the Southwest area with a couple of old pals now joining the fray?
Yeah, look, I see that the over-under on their wins at 8.5, and I tweeted yesterday I think you got to go under that. But I also said that a year ago that I thought Mike Elko was the best hire in the ACC. I think we could prove to be the best hire in the SEC. He is the embodiment of what has worked at Texas A&M in the past. He's a guy who, it's 100 degrees in College Station and he's outside underneath the hood of his car fixing it, right? Like, that's the kind of gritty dude that I assume can win there long term. And I thought they did a nice job in the portal. They had to because of all the departures. We will see, if he can rework that year one miracle that he pulled at Duke in College Station. I think it'll be tougher, but I think the long-term diagnosis at A&M is good. I think getting the culture back from what it was late in the Fisher era when, I think tire fire is charitable is step one.
Neil Blackmon, Saturday Down South with us on 365 Sports. How would you, at least so far, without a game being played, kind of rank where Kalen DeBoer has put Alabama post the greatest college football coach of all time walking out and retiring?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would rank I think they're underrated. I think 9.5 is too low. They added an All-American on the offensive line. I think that's huge, right? Because Jalen Milroe was fourth in the SEC in yards per attempt under pressure last year. He was second in the SEC in yards per attempt when he wasn't pressured. So fourth, pretty good. Second behind the Heisman Trophy winner. is a lot better. They added Caden Proctor, the rare boomerang transfer coming back to Alabama. So I think they're going to be able to block better. They gave up the 11th most sacks in the SEC last season. So that was definitely the weakness of the football team. We saw how easy Michigan was able to pressure them in the Rose Bowl. And, I think that's the big thing for me is can they protect Jalen Milroe? The fact that he's on campus and is a guy that, is a top 10 Heisman vote getter, I think is huge. They lose Caleb Downs, obviously a big deal, but I think Kalen DeBoer brought a good staff. There is certainly continuity of talent. There wasn't the huge portal exodus post-Saban that a lot of people anticipated. DeBoer did a nice job of keeping the pieces in place. Look, he's not going to be Nick Saban, and the sooner that everyone comes to terms with that, the better. Then again, they may never come to terms with that in Tuscaloosa, and that's okay. That's why we love Alabama football, because they're fanatical. But, I think they're in a good position this year at least, and then maybe the hard part starts.
Well, it's like eating at a 4-star restaurant every night for 20 years. And then, you'll probably get some 4-star nights, but there's going to be some nights where you're at Chili's, and that's fine, right? It's fine. Eat at Chili's. Yeah. I mean, triple dipper dinner, man. Come on. Let's get it done. I'm curious on your thoughts. I know it's outside the SEC, but Miami and they have done as much portal work as anybody and swung for the fences when you talk about Ward, Martinez, Sam Brown, like all the guys that they've got in there, Simeon Barrow, everybody who's come in. Is Mario Cristobal out of excuses on his coaching with this roster the way it's built?
Yes, absolutely. I think on paper, Miami is the best team in the league. I think they will be ranked in the top 25 on paper alone. If you look and trust the talent composite at 24/7, they're going to be second behind Clemson entering the season. And, despite all that, this was a team that struggled to get bowl eligible last year. And so I think we will see. They did swing for the fences in the portal, as you said. I don't know how much I like Cam Ward. That's a guy I've got to see it to believe it against good defenses. And he had some rough games against top 25 defenses last year, including just a 2-interception disaster against Stanford defense that was in the top 15 in the country in success rate, and has nowhere near the type of athletes, although probably better scheme, that Cam Ward will face in the Swamp week 1. So let's see what happens in that first game in Gainesville. I think it's a huge game for both those programs. And I think if Mario Cristobal goes to Gainesville and loses to a Florida team that most people don't think is going to a bowl game, it really ratchets up the pressure in Coral Gables, not from the administration standpoint, but from the narratives that are being sold on the recruiting trail. Because Mario is a great recruiter, but at some point, kids want to win.
Neil Blackmon with us Saturday Down South. What are your thoughts about eventually we had Mac Rhodes, Baylor Director of Athletics, on with us earlier, and we asked him about, you hear about this Super 2. In fact, Craig had a nickname for it back when it was called, he called it that. Do you feel like that's imminent, or do you feel like that's more just kind of thought and maybe what some people may want?
I think it's right now. It's what some people want. I do think that we are trending in a way where what some people want or things we don't think are imminent become imminent really quickly. Case in point, right? They expanded 12, and there was immediate discussion. I mean, the story about 12 lasted how long, guys? 3 months, and then they talked about maybe expanding more. So I think the trend towards the Super League is, I think it's trending that direction. I just couldn't put a timetable on it right now to say, hey, this is going to happen next year or in 2 years or in 3 years. And I think what happens in the NIL atmosphere and how many guardrails are put up, whether Congress actually does something, which, we all know how that goes. But that will also dictate maybe what direction this heads in.
Neil, thank you. Great to have you on. If you don't mind, we'll try to have it more often with you, a segment on our show as we get closer to football season and throughout the fall.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate the time, and I love the show.
Thank you very much for saying that. We appreciated the segment. Neil Blackmon, Saturday Down South. We had Cole Thompson on yesterday. When I reached out to him, he mentioned that he loves what we do on 365 Sports. We appreciate those of you who support us every day.